It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a lovely day for a neighborhood, a wonderful day in a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I don't know all the words to the song, so I'll just sing. I wonder if I'm gonna learn the words to the song, but I can't. Well, hi, kids. This is Mr. Traeger today. Today we're gonna be talking about hooch, white lightning, booze, moonshine, liquor. That's right. Today's topic is going to be on alcohol. That's right. Cheers to you, neighbors. No, I'm just kidding. This isn't real. It's just fake. I had you going, though. And probably my singing, you probably thought I'd been drinking a bunch of these, but I honestly forgot the Mr. Rogers song, so I apologize. All right. Today, we're going to be talking about alcohol. We're going to be talking about what alcohol does inside of our system, where we get it from, and what happens, especially when we get too much, and talk about blood alcohol concentrations, things like that. All right? Let's get started. All right. So first up, where does alcohol come from? Well, alcohol that we drink is what's called a grain alcohol, all right? And it usually comes from grain sources. Now, it can also come from vegetable sources. A lot of your vodkas and hard liquors and things like that actually can come from potatoes and other vegetable sources, but primarily the alcohol that we consume comes from grains. That's why we call it grain alcohol: corn, barley, different types of grains, all right? Then we go through a process called distillation. All right, and that's where we have a picture here of a moonshine still. Now, word of the day. It's not really a word of the day. It's a quiz question of the day. Who is this guy in the picture? All right, if you can come into class tomorrow and tell me who this guy is, I'll have something for you. All right. So the distillation process, the grain, they make like a paste out of it, and then they boil it, they heat it up, they boil it, and then the steam rises, they catch the steam in the pipes, and then it goes into some other contraptions, and then it's cooled off with water, and then the steam reliquefies, and then that liquid comes out, and that's where we basically get alcohol. That whole process is what's called fermentation. And what it is basically breaking down the grains, and then the gas that's given off is recaptured as a liquid, and then that's what we call alcohol. All right, that's the basic, very, very simple chemistry lesson breakdown of where we get alcohol from, all right? And so that's where we get all the different types of alcohol and all the different types and flavors and all that kind of stuff. It all depends on the type of grain, and it depends on the type of ingredients that are used to ferment. Is where we get the alcohol from. All right. There's also another type of alcohol. It's called wood alcohol. Now, wood alcohol is where we get things like nail polish remover. We get things like rubbing alcohol that you see on the screen. Different types of additives, maybe in fuel, things in antifreeze, stuff like that. All right. So that also contains alcohol, but it's not safe to consume. That stuff is a very toxic poison, and it's not the same thing as grain alcohol, what people consume. So that's one thing to pay attention to. Those two types of alcohol are not the same thing. There's grain alcohol, which we ferment and consume, and then there's wood alcohol, which we do not consume. All right? So what happens inside the body? Well, the first organ, or the organ that basically takes care of all the alcohol in the body, is what we call the liver. Most of you have heard of this before. The liver, we have one of them. You need it to live. And what it does is it filters the blood, and it filters out all the poisons and toxins that are inside the blood. So that's why it's important that we need it, because we get toxins in the air, we get toxins in the food, we get toxins in the water that we drink. And our liver is responsible for keeping our blood clean. That's what it does. Now, the liver metabolizes, I'll put that up there, which means to break down. The liver metabolizes these toxins, and then we get rid of them, all right? The liver metabolizes or breaks down 100% of the alcohol that we consume, which means that our body treats alcohol as a poison. That's exactly what it is, because the liver only takes out poisons and toxins. If it takes out all the alcohol in our system, that means it's a poison or toxin in our system, and that's what creates some of the effects and all that kind of stuff, which is also what makes it so dangerous in terms of putting too much into our body. All right. So what does the liver do? We put alcohol in our system, it breaks it down, and metabolizes it into two things. It metabolizes it into carbon dioxide and water. Now, our body understands what to do with these two chemicals, all right? Carbon dioxide, we exhale, right? We just breathe it out, okay? And then water, two things happen. We sweat it out, and we also urinate. We pee it out, all right? Those are the two ways that we get rid of basically the alcohol that's in our system. All right. Have you ever heard when a person starts drinking, they suddenly have to go to the bathroom more frequently? That's common sense because that's what the liver does. All right. When in hot weather, people talk about if they drink too much alcohol, they actually get dehydrated. And you think, well, if I'm consuming, a bunch of these, this is 12 ounces of liquid. But really, because this liquid has alcohol in it, it's actually causing your kidneys to work overtime, and it dumps too much water, and you actually increase your chance of dehydration rather than just drinking water or something along those lines. If you drink the same amount of water as you do alcohol, you'll have to go to the bathroom more frequently with the alcohol because it's going to cause your kidneys to go into overdrive, and then that opens you up for dehydration. All right, so that's kind of where all that comes from. So liver breaks it down into carbon dioxide and water. We get rid of the carbon dioxide and water in excess, and that's how our body cleans the blood from the alcohol that's in there. Now, how long does it take to do this? It takes approximately 1 hour to process or to metabolize a half ounce of alcohol. All right, that's a healthy adult liver. Half an ounce of alcohol per hour. All right, we're going to learn a little bit more in class about what constitutes a half ounce of alcohol, so we'll get into that a little bit later. But that's our basic formula: half ounce of alcohol per hour. All right, and so if we understand or know how much alcohol we're putting in our system, we can also predict how long it's going to take for our liver to get all that alcohol cleaned out of our blood, which then, of course, is what we call being sober. All right, sobering up. All right, so what happens here? Now, when we drink alcohol, all right, obviously into the stomach. It's behind the liver. The liver's right here. Okay, so in the stomach right here, alcohol is going to go into the stomach, and 20% is immediately going to get absorbed into the bloodstream. All right. Now, what happens to the other 80%? Well, the other 80% gets absorbed in the small intestine. All right. It goes through basically the first part of the small intestine. The rest of the alcohol basically will get digested just like our food would. All right. Now, the key here is that once alcohol gets into the bloodstream, all right, it's going to get pumped all over the place. All right, it's going to get pumped all over. Now, every time it gets to the brain, it's going to affect the brain. Now, that same molecule of alcohol is going to continue to get pumped all through the body, back to the brain. It's going to affect the brain. It's going to get pumped all through the body, boom, back to the brain. All through the body, back to the brain. And it's going to do that until the liver, which is right here, processes that alcohol, metabolizes the alcohol. Now, do you guys remember how long it takes to get the alcohol out of your system? What the formula is? Did you guess? It's a half ounce per hour. Okay? So if we know how much alcohol is in our system, it's going to take the liver a half an ounce per hour to get all that alcohol out of our system. And eventually, over time, the liver is going to get all of that out. All right? So that's basically what's going on. But that's primarily the main organs that are being affected, the liver and the brain. Every time alcohol reaches the brain up here, it's going to continually slow the brain down, all right? And that's what a depressant means, okay? All right. So, influences of impairment. How quickly does all this happen, all right? Well, there's 7 factors that we have to take into consideration, all right? The first factor is body size, how big a person is. A big person versus a little person. Big person is going to feel the effects of the alcohol much later or much slower than a smaller person is, primarily because they just have more body mass. They have more blood in their system, and so therefore the same amount of alcohol gets diluted. Think, for example, if you could pump someone's blood out of their body and they still survive. So you take a big person, let's say me, for example, I'm about 240 pounds. You pump all my blood into a bucket, and you take someone who's like 120 pounds, pump all their blood into a bucket. All right, whose bucket's gonna have more blood? My bucket is. I got more blood. And let's say we pour a half ounce of alcohol into each bucket of blood. Whose blood is going to be more concentrated? That's right. The smaller person's blood is going to be more concentrated. Whose bucket is going to be more diluted? The bigger person. So when we use the same amount of alcohol based on blood volume, the more blood we have, the less the effect is of the alcohol. So that's where body size comes into play. Next up, we have body mass. Let's take 2 people of the same size, 2 people who are 240 pounds, all right? You take a 240-pound bodybuilder, you take a 240-pound couch potato, all right? They're the same size, but alcohol moves through body fat much quicker. And so therefore, the person who is the couch potato is going to feel the effects of the alcohol much quicker than the bodybuilder is going to because he has a higher muscle mass content, all right? So body mass comes into play. Gender, male versus female. Now, some of that has to do with size, some of that has to do with body mass. But it also has to do with menstrual cycle. It also has to do with estrogen and progesterone. It has a lot to do with those other body chemicals. All right, and so typically, even women who are the same size or the same body mass as men, typically women are going to feel the effects of the alcohol much quicker than men are, based on gender and body chemistry. All right. Next, we have age, old versus young. So we take a 14-year-old versus a 26-year-old. Okay. Because a 14-year-old is still developing, and you got fluctuations of hormones and all this kind of stuff, it's going to change how the body processes the alcohol. Not to mention, a 14-year-old's liver isn't fully developed, and so it can't process the alcohol at the same rate that an adult healthy liver can. And so the younger a person is, it's going to change the way that the liver works. Let's go the opposite. Let's take a 26-year-old versus an 80-year-old. Okay. The 80-year-old's liver has been working for a long time. It's not going to be working as efficiently because of age, so therefore the 26-year-old's liver is going to be working more efficiently. All right? So age does play a role in how quickly we feel the effects of alcohol. Second of all, medication that we're taking. This includes illegal drugs, marijuana or cocaine or heroin or anything like that. Not to mention people taking, prescription medications. Let's say any prescription medications, all the hundreds of thousands of medications that are out there. All those things are going to be influencing alcohol's effect, or alcohol is going to be influencing the effect of the medication. For example, antibiotics. If someone's taking an antibiotic and they drink alcohol, it starts to eliminate the effectiveness of the antibiotic. Birth control pills. Ladies, is important. Pay attention. Birth control pills. If a woman's taking birth control pills for pregnancy prevention and she drinks alcohol, it starts to decrease or eliminate the effectiveness of the birth control pills because of the chemical clash that's going on there. And so that's important to understand. So the medications and things that people are taking does have an impact on how alcohol works. You'll see a lot of medications. You're not supposed to drink while you're using certain medications. There's a reason for that. All right. Next up, we've got if you're getting sick or if you're tired, you haven't gotten enough sleep, your body's not working at 100%. That's going to affect the way that alcohol influences you in terms of how quickly you feel the effects of the alcohol. Altitude. Okay, where you're drinking at in terms of altitude. Now, it's not so much like the east or west side of your town. All right. It's more like if I'm in New Orleans versus Denver. So I go on vacation and I fly to Denver. The alcohol that I drink in Denver is going to affect me much quicker than in New Orleans because it's above sea level. And so my blood is thinner, and so the concentration, the consistency of the content of the alcohol in my bloodstream is going to be much higher, meaning that I'm going to feel the effects quicker because my blood's thinner. Down in New Orleans, it's below sea level. You may not feel the effects of that alcohol as quickly because your blood is thicker, more oxygen in the air, all that kind of stuff. All right. Now, this comes into play I guess much greater when we talk about flying. Okay, you ever wonder why on airplanes when they serve alcohol they're in these little tiny bottles? Okay, I bless you. Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that alcohol affects people differently in the airport than it does at 40,000 feet or 20,000 feet or however high planes go, and that's why they give you little bottles. But what about that person who's sitting in the airport lounge and has a couple drinks before they get on a plane? The plane takes off, and now all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what just happened? All right. And that's because of the altitude issue. All right. Yeah, I understand planes are pressurized, but they're not pressurized perfectly like they are, like the atmosphere here on the ground. Okay. So you're still going to change the way that alcohol affects a person being on the ground versus, 25, 30,000 feet in the air. All right. So altitude plays a role. So each time a person drinks, all these things have to be taken into consideration in terms of how quickly they're going to feel the effects of the alcohol. All right. Because all these things come into play. All right. All right, let's take a look at a blood alcohol level chart today. BAL and BAC. All right, and what it stands for is blood alcohol level or blood alcohol concentration. It says it right here. Oops. Right here, blood alcohol level, blood alcohol concentration. All right. Now, what this is telling us is if a person has X number of drinks, it's going to put them at a certain percentage of their blood alcohol level. And when they're at this percentage of blood alcohol level, they're going to feel these things. Okay? And for the most part, it's a pretty, I guess, decent, I don't want to say guideline. All right? But it's not always 100% accurate. All right? I can't guarantee that if I have one drink, I'm going to be at a .025. Okay? Because if we look up here, it says number of drinks in a 1 hour period. Okay, so we understand that because we talked about how fast the liver can metabolize alcohol. And it also says for a 140-pound person. Okay, now here's where it gets tricky. Is it a 140-pound boy or girl? Is it a 140-pound athlete or is it a 140-pound couch potato? Okay, those things need to be taken in consideration. Is it a 140-pound person in Denver or a 140-pound person in New Orleans? Okay, those things have to I guess be accounted for in terms of how quickly our blood alcohol level is going to rise, how quickly it gets into our bloodstream. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to do one thing that's going to make this chart more accurate. And all I simply need to do is eliminate that column. All right, and what that means is it doesn't matter if it takes me, let's say 1 drink to get to a 0.025, or it takes me 3 drinks to get to a 0.025. The point is, when I get to a 0.025, I'm going to experience these things. All right, that's basically what this means. All right, so I don't want to get too caught up in, how many drinks it takes to get there. Once you get there, these are the things that are going to happen. Now, I'm not going to go through all the things on this chart. You can kind of read through that, and we're probably going to go through this a little bit in class as well. But there's 2 numbers that I want you to pay attention to. All right. I want you to pay attention to this number right here, 0.05. Okay, and what's happening with 0.05? This is when our inhibitions are lessened, judgment starts to become impaired, and our behavior starts to become impulsive. This is when we start what's called, I'm going to write it over here on the side if my pen will let me. All right, mental impairment. Okay, now we're going to learn more about impairment in Vodcast 8.2, but mental impairment simply means that alcohol is starting to affect how I'm thinking. All right, it's starting to affect my thought process. Okay, so here we start to see inhibitions are lessened, judgment starts to become impaired. Okay, so we're not really seeing a whole lot of physical things, but we're starting to see some mental changes that are going on. Okay, so that's at a 0.05. Okay, at a 0.08 to a 0.01. Now, what's important about that is that a 0.08 is legally drunk in all 50 states. All right, it used to be 0.1 a while ago, but all 50 states are at 0.08 now. 0.08 for someone who's over the age of 21 is considered legally intoxicated, legally impaired, legally drunk. All right, and this is where we start getting into DUIs and OWIs. I've heard it both ways. DUI stands for driving under the influence, and OWI stands for operating while intoxicated or operating while impaired. But that's the magic number is 0.08. All right. Now, at 0.08, now we start to see things like vision, hearing, judgment, reflexes. This one's important, and coordination. All right. I didn't draw very good. Those are all starting to become impaired. All right. Now, what that means is that physically, I'm starting to be affected by the alcohol that I'm drinking. So this is what's called, we already talked about mental impairment. This is called physical impairment. You can add those into your notes if you want to, but we're going to talk about them more in 8.2, so don't get too freaked out by it. But mental impairment, my brain started to be affected. Physical impairment, my body now is starting to become affected. All right. Now, as my blood alcohol level rises, 0.16, we're going to see all these things, these same things, vision, hearing, judgment, reflexes, coordination, all get worse. All right. Continued vision is getting blurry, severely impaired. Hearing is severely impaired. Speech is severely impaired. Intoxication is extreme. No control over thoughts and perceptions. Walking, even standing. Right here, look at this. See if I can get my pen to work. Even standing becomes difficult. That's how impaired a person can get. And then we get into the 0.321, and now we're starting to see words like coma, and we start to see words like death. All right. And the problem with that is that you can put yourself in a drug-induced coma with alcohol. We call that alcohol poisoning. Okay. A person drinks so much that they pass out. All right. Now, if they continue to get worse as the alcohol keeps absorbing through their body, okay, and they start to get worse, the next step is death. All right. Person gets in a crash, they hurt their brain. They're in a coma, traumatic coma because of an injury. You go to the hospital, you slap them around, they don't wake up. You throw water on them, they don't wake up. They're in a coma. Duh, you wouldn't do that to a person. Okay. Now, you're at a party, someone drinks to the point where they pass out. You slap them around, they don't wake up. You draw funny pictures on them, they don't wake up. You take pictures of them and put them on Facebook, they don't wake up. They're in a drug-induced coma because of alcohol. Right? It's really no different. Their brain is injured to the point where they are unconscious now because of the amount of alcohol and chemical that they put into their body. All right? And so the next step is death. That's how serious that gets. All right? So think about that the next time you hear about someone who's passed out at some party or whatever. All right? And that's where it can be pretty scary. And that's where we get the alcohol poisoning stuff. All right? So as our blood alcohol level goes up, our ability to function goes down. Our brain gets turned off more. Our body starts to shut down more and more as well. All right, and so that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of blood alcohol levels and what they do. All right, so in class tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit more about what a drink is. We're going to go through some of these blood alcohol levels a little bit more, and kind of answer some questions and all that kind of stuff. All right, don't forget to take your quiz on Kia. Log in. I know it's been a few weeks since we've had one of these podcasts, so don't forget how to do all that stuff. And I guess I'll check you later. Cheers. Just kidding. It's fake still. See. With me, alcohol.